Viewers really love the last round of Stalker stories. What does that say about you? Hey, I'm not judging. Let's get into it. The front row. An idyllic present couldn't erase the wounds from the past. I mean, it can surely make the scars less noticeable, but then as soon as you close your eyes, the feeling catches up with you. It can happen anywhere, in the line to pay for groceries, or even when you're driving. You just go through it all over again. There's no escaping the aftermath. You'll live with fear for the rest of your life. Well, that's exactly what happened to me. I couldn't tell back then, but I had a stalker for almost 4 decades. It happened little by little. I didn't realize he was spying on me until the cops discovered the truth. But let me start from the beginning. I was in my 20s and had a big group of friends. We were all actors. In fact, Mark, my best friend, ended up doing the real thing on Broadway. He was so talented, he deserved every bit of that. As for me, I was mediocre to say the most. I didn't have any real talent. My dreams were big balloons filled with high hopes and thin air. My first plays came along, and this guy was coming to every performance. He would sit in the first row and clap and cheer or weep every time. Time went by and I had my twins. Motherhood isn't compatible with the road to Hollywood. I had to make a choice, and I chose family over adventure. I was in love and nursing my 2 babies, and we would take pictures all the time. This was back when cameras needed rolls, and you would use them on special occasions only. Well, cameras saw us blossom into this beautiful kaleidoscope of happiness. Those were the good times. We would get our photos developed in town. My husband did it. Well, he was my husband then, we're divorced now. But that's a different and much longer story. We did that non-stop for almost 20 years until the twins left home and we sold the big old house and moved to an apartment downtown. I just couldn't handle the void, the emptiness of that big house. It had once been filled with so much noise that silence was deafening. We took some photos of the moving, just the usual room full, room empty sequence to remember what life was like before we moved out. I took the photos to the same place we had taken them all our lives. To my surprise, it was the same guy in the front row. He smiled at me as if he was surprised to see me, and I couldn't believe my luck. He started doing his thing with me. He started talking to me about the actress the world had lost because I wasn't acting anymore. He said I used to be a star, that my glow brought him into a spell. He said he was haunted by my performances. I have to admit this strategy worked with me, and I was completely into the game. He would even comment on how much the kids had grown and how beautiful we all were. I invited him over for dinner. He came into our apartment with presents for the twins, flowers for me, and wine for dinner. He behaved like a gentleman, treated us with extreme kindness, and asked a lot of questions. I gave him a tour of the house before he left, and he inspected everything before leaving. I followed him to the door, and when I came back, my husband said, "What a nice person. He's a smooth talker. We should have him over more often." So we did. We kept on taking our camera rolls to him and inviting him to dinner. That lasted until the divorce. That's when all hell was unleashed. This man showed his true colors. He asked me once at his shop if I was still married. I stopped printing the picture and looked him in the eye, but didn't answer. He said, "It's because I don't see him in the pictures anymore. I was just curious, I'm sorry." That fake empathy was so believable that I confirmed it on the spot. I was heartbroken, and he played the role of the nice guy you can trust. So I did. I trusted this man with all my secrets, and he followed my conversations very closely, remembering information from one meeting to the next and asking the right questions. He drove a pearl gray Toyota Prius, a nice guy car, of course. I had been inside because he brought me home a couple of times. After my 50th birthday, my knee started giving me some trouble. I use a cane. The thing is that I started seeing the Prius at night, just across the street from the apartment building. This happened for around a month. I didn't have a camera phone back then, but I decided to confront him. So I took some photos of him outside the building and took them in to be developed. When I went back to pick them up 1 week later, he wasn't there. He'd gone on a family urgency and had a replacement who just handed me the developed pictures. That night, I heard noises. They came from the door to my apartment. I looked out the peephole, and it was him. He had a screwdriver, a knife, and a drill. I locked myself inside the bathroom and called the cops. They stopped him right on time. He'd already opened the front door. When they searched his house, they found photos of us taken by him inside our house. He did it with a telescopic lens, I guess. We're sleeping, walking, cooking, loving, cuddling, or any other thing you would do at home when you think nobody's watching. He had some photos of me naked, having showers, or showing new lingerie to my husband. Very private scenes of our lives. Plus, he had all our family photos ordered by year from the beginning. The big album said, for example, our trip to Las Vegas or something. He had glued an image of his head on every picture as if he was part of the family. I had a stalker for the past 4 decades in my inner circle, even dining with me in my apartment. That's the fear that will never leave me. It can be anyone. Gold. I know what I'm about to tell you is wrong. I was forced into professional help right on time, and I could change my path. I'm not proud of who I was back then, but I can tell you it was beyond the power of my reasoning. It was absolutely compulsive. I was never in control. Thankfully, I couldn't perpetrate my plan the way I wanted to. Otherwise, I'd be rotting in jail and she would be dead. Oh my, God only knows who else I could have hurt. But back to the story, I was beginning my shift at the cafeteria. The usual, turning on the machines, setting up tables, putting the pastries on the counter. The sun was shining brightly, and all I could see was the glare coming through the big front windows. Suddenly, she walked in. Her hair wasn't blonde, it was golden. She was an explosion of golden glitter walking through the front door. I was instantly taken in awe. I had the impression I was in the presence of a superior being of some kind. She sat down at the counter and ordered a coffee, but she had to repeat it 3 times until I finally heard her. I was lost somewhere else, swimming in a pool of golden honey in my mind. That night, I took the receipt of her credit card home. I didn't know it yet, but it was the beginning of a long list of things I did to get her information. I looked her up and found her social media profiles. She was just as stunning in every picture. Her perfect smile, the dimples showing off, proud, surrounded by friends. In a way, I think she was everything I was not. I lived on the outskirts. My great-grandmother had left me this tiny apartment 1 hour away from work. I just sat there alone over the torn-out bed after a long day of work and thought of a million ways to be with her. If I could go back to studying, then I would definitely be with someone like her. I also had plans to rob a bank to use that money to pretend I was this hotshot businessman from Europe conducting social research. I was wearing this loser guy disguise, but I would charm her with my infinite grace and refined taste. Still, I was practicing my dance moves over a floor full of dead roaches that climbed every half-empty, smelly pizza box I had there. I didn't know just how messed up my life was. I needed help, and I needed it badly. Every day I would practice my words with her after work. I would commute talking to myself, sometimes even out loud, picturing our life together. The intricacies and the tenderness. The little idiosyncrasies that made our relationship so special. That's when it first occurred to me. Of course, we were meant to be together. She was going to love me for who I was as soon as she saw who I could become. I mean, I wasn't yet the most famous entrepreneur in the tech industry, but I could do it, you know? I could have a tech empire. I will someday. Together we could have it all. That was my comforting thought back then. Somehow, she was the missing link between my dreams and the real world I was living in. Oh my, I could almost touch the dimples in our children while she hugged me. In the afternoon, undressed and turned into nighttime holding a glass of wine. Then I would wake up because a cockroach was either making too much noise eating old fries from an old bag in this old, tiny flat, or walking over my face. Finally, she came over for the last time. I'm moving out. I found a better job on the East Coast, and I'd love some sun too, she said with a big smile. I almost fainted. I couldn't lose her. She was my future, my dream, my everything. How was my soulmate going to leave me where I was, as a full-formed worm but with no butterfly wings in sight? I wasn't going to let that happen, by no means. I already knew where she lived, and I also knew the itinerary. I called the travel agency with their ID number and personal data asking for the schedule. I said I was her secretary, and they bought the whole thing. The night came. She was leaving the next morning. I was crouching outside her door. I had a little bottle of chloroform in my back pocket and a handkerchief soaked in it ready to put her to sleep. I was also carrying seals and a knife, just in case. She was going to miss her flight, and that would make her understand we were made to be together. Then she would help me rise from the dumpster and grow my wings. We were going to be such a beautiful family. She would thank me for it later when we were both old and overlooked the ocean holding hands. Her golden hair turned white, and the sunset transformed it into pure fire. But I was so scared and excited and also very drunk. Whenever I was about to face something important, I drank. It could put anxiety and terror behind a plexiglass wall. They could see me and I could see them, but they couldn't harm me at all. I had my chance and I stepped in, trying to put the handkerchief to her mouth. She swerved my move and I hit the edge of the door with my forehead. It made a big cut. Blood was dripping down my face. I took a second chance at it and succeeded by putting myself behind her. She was fierce, but I was fueled by blind, compulsive desire. Just when I managed to tighten her hands down, the police arrived at the scene and arrested me. I never realized I was trying to kidnap her at her front door. It only took one neighbor to end my entire plan. I have a restrictive order and I haven't seen her again since. I moved to the West Coast and go to a group now every day. I tell them about my fantasies, my desires, and my new targets. They always find a way to bring me to my senses. If it wasn't for them, God only knows where I could be. When it all gets really bad though, I just rub the big scar on my forehead and remind myself how far I can go with it. I'm learning to be better, to control it, to get help when I can't make it stop. I'm getting there one day at a time. Have you ever been chased? Before I start telling you this story, let me ask you something. Have you ever been chased? That feeling is a difficult one to convey in words. It's a mix of survival instincts, genuine fear, and an uncanny burst of energy and excitement. Well, as I tell you the story, hold on to that experience because there was a whole lot of chasing in those times. But let's rewind the wheels of time. The year is 1997, and I'm standing outside my house holding my bicycle in one hand and a pocket-sized MP3 player in the other. My headphones blasting Song 2 by Blur, the biggest song of the year by far. I was meeting up with my best friend. We were going to the movies. She was the coolest girl in the school. Everyone wanted to be her friend, yet she chose to spend her time with me. She would always brag about how other popular girls invited her to parties, barbecues, and all sorts of rendezvous all the time. She always said she declined them because of me. She didn't want her popularity to harm our friendship. The movie was Jackie Brown. I remember it because I'm still a huge Tarantino fan. I just loved spending time with her. She had this one-of-a-kind laughter that was so funny it was contagious. Once she started, the entire room followed, always. But besides that, she was always full of compliments towards me. She would talk about me as if I were the new Jack Kerouac whenever I brought up my precarious poems and bursts in prose. That afternoon, she said, "Best friends forever no matter what?" And I agreed with a huge smile. We mixed a drop of blood from each of our thumbs. Such a teenage thing to do. I somehow felt she was the only one that understood me. My other friends would either suddenly disappear or slowly fade out of my life. She was everything to me. We spent all day every day together. It was an absolute blast. By the year 2000, I started playing in the school's basketball team. I wasn't very good back then, and I'm not very good now either. But I'm fit, eager, and have a lot of stamina. I was 17, and I started hanging out with the guys on the basketball team. We would go to your typical house parties at night and in the afternoons by the river. I started talking to other people, and a whole new world opened for me. Some feelings arose toward this girl. Her name was Hannah. She was on the gymnastics team. We would all hang out and do sports together and enjoy the sun. I told my best friend I had feelings for Hannah, and I was going to try and kiss her. That changed everything. I remember it perfectly. Tuesday, April 6, 2000. I went to school and everybody avoided me. Hannah looked at me in the hallway and then looked away with a disgusted face. Suddenly, I was an outcast with my own friends and nobody could explain to me why. It was hell. That was until I found out it was her. One of my friends came forward and asked me weird questions. I said no to everything. He said she had told everybody these awkward, gruesome stories about me. She'd spread the word I had taken care of myself in class with a porno mag. It had always been her. She talked people away from me. She would tell them made-up stories about my past and myself, and they would just avoid me. It had been happening for years. I realized it at that moment. It had never been me who lost interest in my friends. She cut them off with lies. When I confronted her, she denied the whole thing and became a violent person. She brought up our blood pact and swore to kill me several times because I had broken it and played with her heart. "I gave you my best years," she screamed before never speaking to me again. But that's not all. The following decade was full of chasing. She would just appear out of nowhere and maybe vandalize my bike and later my car. She would chase me with her mom's car and literally try to kill me when I was riding my bicycle. She chased me on foot 3 or 4 times with a baseball bat in her hands. She once tried to choke me with a rope. She came from behind. I was in the park having a sandwich. I managed to escape because I'm fit and stronger than her, but I could very well be dead. I know, I let things escalate too much before reporting her to the cops. But even that wasn't the turning point for me. The turning point came when she messed with Hannah and our family. One thing was to chase me, but a very different one was to chase my children or my wife. She crashed our family car violently and started laughing. I can remember that uncanny giggle to this day. She can't be within 1 mile of distance from us now, but I still remember the feeling of speeding up on the bike with the bumper of her car touching my rear tire. Some nights, when I'm about to fall asleep, I can hear her giggle and the rough touch of rope on my neck.